Welcome back. We look forward to continuing the 11th chapter, Shayich B'Emuna, page 176. We're holding towards the bottom, Al Derech Moshel, which is 5 lines from the bottom, but it makes sense to recap a little bit the end of the last class, not because we should take time in the present class repeating this, what we said in the past, but it was the conclusion, and as such noted this important message of this previous class with a bit of brevity. It wasn't adequately explained. I mean, the idea was adequately explained, but nonetheless to find it in the words, to find the concept which we concluded last class in the text. So we'll start a few lines before. So we're learning Shayich B'Emuna, namely for the newcomers to point out, or which we did mention quite a few times, the uniqueness of this segment, all but 12 chapters, but extremely unique, revolutionary messages or transformative experience learning Shayich B'Emuna, because this is the foundation, Achdus Hashem, Emunas Hashem, this is the foundation of the Yid. The Emunah, the Yisaid of everything is Emunas Hashem, and Achdus Hashem, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, is the mantra of the Yid, and Pamayim B'chol Yom, and a few times we need not to explain, but the Alter Rebbe is Shayich B'Emuna, bringing this into a different type of gate, or a different type of area, opens up a gate, the Shar, to a different type of Achdus Hashem and Emunah. So what do I mean a different type? Meaning to say, it's not just like another shetla, another perspective on Achdus Hashem and Emunah Hashem. We've mentioned this a few times. This is revolutionary information. A person goes into that gate, will never be the same. We say many times we'll never come out, but we never have to come out. We can remain there because it's the best place we can be. Really appreciating Emunah, Achdus Hashem the way it really is. And Emunas Hashem the way it really is. So it's not just more information. This is about transformation. Indeed about transformation. Again, we mentioned it a few times, but it's always good to, especially those who are newcomers to this class, it's worthwhile to go through all the class of Shayich B'Emuna. As we mentioned, we merited to conclude Lukuti Amorim, and Shayich B'Emuna we began about 6-7 months ago, give or take. It's worth it to learn it as it is, and it's not only a new light. The light opens up. The way it's the light, the way Achdus Hashem is seen, or the perspective of Achdus Hashem, oneness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the way it is from Hashem's eyes. It's even Alter Rebbe has over here the Yichudi Tata, Yichudi Ilah. Again, these are words which we can appreciate just by going through these chapters one by one, and understanding this revolutionary presentation gifted to us by the Alter Rebbe. So the wherever you're watching it, there's on the original website, there's the advantage of following it as well there, or at that website, because it's set up in a way that all the previous classes are lined up, and you can tap into any one at any given time. Literally click away, easy access, easy opening, and an important advantage, as we mentioned time and again, namely for the newcomers, this text is on a separate scroll bar, as such easy to follow, and again access to all the previous classes, not only Shayich B'Emuna, but as well Lukuti Amorim. So that's TanyaOnline.com. So where we left off was, we spoke about the significance of Machshava Dibra Maisa, thought, speech, and action. And again, we shouldn't really take much time to elaborate other than the very final message, because it's a click away. You can see the previous class, I think, is the 3rd or 4th class in this Shayich B'Emuna, in this chapter Yud Aleph, and within seconds you could tap into the previous, the one before, in general, to all the classes in the Shayich B'Emuna. So it's really important that we try to utilize the time of this class for the information of this class. But to recap briefly, that is, we're going to try. Machshava Dibra Maisa, thought, speech, and action, is extremely important in the interactions and inner relationships between human beings, and so to HaKadosh Baruch Hu with His world. And in the very beginning, even the creation of the world, that we explain, it's not only the inner workings of the human being which bring production, his intellect, his emotions, which are deep naturally. Emotions run deep, thought, speech, words seems extremely inferior in comparison to emotions, and they are, understandably. So this is just words in comparison, that is. But we explain that you want to, in the end of the day, execute a emotion, or you're aroused with kindness, compassion, and so on. You want to execute it, you want to make it real, that the recipient should appreciate it. We gave the example, poor, a needy individual, which you want to extend kindness or compassion to. It's not enough that you emote, you're able to arouse that emotion, because the other party won't. Yeah, they're able to identify that someone is identifying with them, but nonetheless, it doesn't make a difference really on the ground if you don't say, could you want to please come in, make yourself, those words, come in, make yourself comfortable, or here's $100 to buy yourself a meal, or come in, have a meal. You go to the pantry, you take out the bread, and you serve the meal, and you arrange the meal, and you serve the meal, as an example, or you help somebody with other, if it's lodging, as we gave an example. These are just simple words, but these words are not just stam words and letters. This is what brings everything to actuality, to reality, and therefore it is so crucial that in order to bring out the maximum benefit and the maximum fruition of any emotion, as an example, or for that matter, even the Chochmah Bina Das, any intellectual concept, we want to give it over. The only thing is, when it comes to intellectualizing, not necessarily that we have to, Eisius HaMachshava, explain a number of places, Kabbalah and Chassidus, that you need those Eisius as well to bring structure to that intellect, and independently. But when it comes to emotion, you want to express that emotion in order to come to to fruition, into actuality, to be realized. You need to put on that cap of Eisius. If it starts from Eisius HaMachshava, a pattern in your mind, that you set up a certain strategy how you're going to execute these feelings, or namely by dibur, you call the person in, you speak divrei ava, divrei chesed, words of love and kindness and compassion, and namely the levush of maaseh, you actually execute it. So this is a cap on, so what the motor is naturally the emotion, and that's where all the energy is, but nonetheless, the Eisius are extremely essential in order to bring it min hakoyach al hapoel, from the potential state, the way it's within you, into actuality. So again, we elaborate on this nekuda, this idea. Another point we pointed out, that Eisius have an advantage, that you can take the same emotion and divide it, right? Here's a place to sleep over, here's a meal. They're both coming from chesed, but it's just chesed, so it's something which is, it's not articulate. And if it's not articulate, you cannot divide the message in a way that it should bring the maximum comfort to the recipient, because it's just a sensation of kindness, it's a sensation of passion. But the advantage of dibur, as an example, the Eisius, the words, the letters, if it's machshava dibur, for that matter, in the end of the day, it's maaseh as well. But not only putting a cap that allowing it to make it real, the words, you could divide it. Again, as we gave the example, someone wants to demonstrate kindness and compassion, he could put it into so many different words, and each word, each setup of words is a different message, which is ultimately bringing a benefit to the recipient. So we spoke about, and similarly, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but additional to this, what it says, that HaBasara Dvarim HaKadosh Baruch Hu Bara Ha'olam Nivra Ha'olam, like it says in the chapter Yud, Basara Dvarim, this is the Chochmah B'Tvuna B'Das, and Hashem's midas, the inner workings of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And then comes Basar Mamoris. Where does Basar Mamoris come in? HaKadosh Baruch Hu already creates the world Basar Dvarim, as Alter Rebbe explained so in detail with the Amid of Chesed to the first day, Gvura to the second, and he only speaks about those two. But in the end of the day, all 6 midas associated with the 6 days of creation. And there's the Chochmah Bina Das, as everything was created by profound design, and so on and so forth. So where does Maimoris come in? Yeah, you need a Maimoris in order that it should come in a Koyach al Hapoel, that there should be an actual world. You need Ma'amoris. As we explained before, the way it is by a human being, for that matter, the reason why it's by a human being, because that's the way it is on high. We explained this many times. When we say a mashal, it's established, so we tap into the way things are by us. But the reason, just tangentially mentioned, the reason why it's by us is because that's the way it's on high. And also from the same mimer, from the same rather chesed as an example, you have the and you have mayim. They're both associated with chesed, similar to the idea the way it is by man. Because there is isis hamagbiles, they limit, they establish a certain structure, so it can be divided. Here's sleepover, here's a good meal, here's some money for your mortgage, or whatever it is. Any way you want to extend your kindness to the other party. So the ma'amoris have an advantage that it could be divided, and so too by Hashem. For example, Hashem said, there shall be water, and there shall be, in other words, there's mayim coming from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and Yehi Ayr. So they're both expression of Hashem's kindness, but nonetheless, it's divided, so you can have from the same chesed, different ma'amoris. So the last class we concluded that just like there is by man, Isis HaMachshav and Isis HaDibur, letters associated with thoughts and letters associated with speech, and the obvious difference, there is the Isis HaMachshav is very structured, because in Midas there are no Isis yet, there's no letters, there's no structured letters in the world of emotions. Tereik elaborates on this in chapter 20, for that matter, in Likutei Amorim, the original segment. Likutei Amorim, it's also a click away. Now he explains that Isis take formation in machshava, in thought. So in machshava there is structure. Again, we even mentioned a few times, for that matter, we think in languages, in certain languages, because there is Isis, there's a structure of letters even in machshava, but we could appreciate and understand that when in the world of machshava, they're very subtle. For that matter, you can't know what I'm thinking. I can have a whole structure in machshava, and if you're a regular person, maybe if you're a tzaddik, you do know, but a regular person doesn't know what the other party's thinking, because it has that duality. In one hand, it is Isis, structured Isis, which just take formation when it comes into the machshava, not in midah, certainly not in chachma bin das, but nonetheless, it's la'atzmai. It's very close, much closer to the nefesh, and therefore that's why machshava mishatetet tamid. It's always flowing. When it comes to dibur, it says eis ladaber, eis lachshe. It's time to talk and time not to talk. A person doesn't talk all the time. He shouldn't talk all the time. But you can see that it stops, it starts, and so on and so forth. Machshava is meshotetet tamid. Why so? Because it's so close to the nefesh. The nefesh always is, so too the machshava always flows. So you have again machshava, this duality. It's structured Isis, but it's very close to the nefesh. Overwhelmed by nafshi, the soul experience, and the soul energy, and as such, it's something lifnim. It stays with inward, as opposed to dibur. Dibur is already, the Isis become much more emphatic, structured, and as such, they are a little more rachok mi nefesh, and therefore again, eis ledaber, eis lachshot, time to talk and time you don't talk, because it's a notch away from the nefesh, and also you see the structure in dibur. It takes so much more time to express something in speech. You can think something in 2 minutes, and it take you an hour to deliver it via speech, because it's much more structured and inferior than the Isis and Machshav. And also, you see they're much more evident. When I talk, you know what, you hear my message, the other party, it's already entering into the world out of the domain of the talker. When it comes to Machshava, it remains within the domain of the individual who's thinking. When it comes to Dibur, it leaves my domain. It's already entering into the atmosphere, entering the other party can know already where I'm coming from, what my message is, and the reason is because, again, it's inferior than Machshava. It has its advantages, understandably, over Machshava. For that matter, the virtue of man is that he's able to talk and able to express himself in a structured, even eloquent manner. The Targum says, because this is something very unique, which is exclusive to man, naturally the advantage of speech. But if you look at speech itself, it's inferior than Machshava. You need not to explain. It's already when it leaves the person. And so too, he says, when it comes to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. When it comes to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we have the same idea that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, from Hashem's Isis and Machshava, what was created, Al Min Stim, in hidden worlds. And when it comes to Isis Dibur, what was created, Al Min Disgalia, revealed worlds. Now, this part we did take in the last class, the end of last class, to explain, so we're not going to elaborate much. But we're going to try to say it very brief. When you say Al Min Disgalia, a revealed world, And you say hidden world, on the onset comes out, a revealed world sense seems to be much greater. It's a revealed world, a hidden world, you can't identify it so much, so it's probably less important in value, or less in its stature, is a lower stature than the Almond Isgalian. But we explained last week, the opposite is so true. The reason why it's steaming, it's similar to the Isis HaMachshava. They are much more qualitative than the Isis HaDibur because they're so close to the Nefesh, and it's all an inward experience. And so to these Eilamis, yes, they're Isis, they're created, they are worlds, but the reason why they're Satum, they're steaming, why are they hidden? Because they're overwhelmed by the presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So the Eilamness, if you will, Nishabahem, the Eilam dimension stands hidden. Why so? Because it's overwhelmed by the presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, of the energy of Elokus, better said. And therefore, yes, there is an Eilam, but it's Sasum. The Eilam Shabbat, the Gemara says, Eilam is Melashon Helam v'Hester, something with a dynamic which conceals the reality of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but that's Sasum within HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so it doesn't, the Eilam Shabbat, that concealment, is not so emphatic, because it's overtaken by the Elokus. The Elokus is so present. We gave the example. Eilam Atzilus is classically known as a part of Almin steaming. It's an Eilam, as we explained so many times, the idea of Eilam Atzilus in comparison to the Eilam is Bia Bri Yitzir Asiya. It's not just one world over Bri Yitzir Asiya. It's a different phenomenon. Like Gur Chora is an example. We spoke so many times about this. But that would be classically an Eilam Sasum. It's an Eilam, but it's Sasum because it houses the Ein Sof, and and all about every midah, everything about Atzilus represents and is overwhelmed and by the Ein Sof. Every dynamic, every detail of Atzilus, there's not even Ascholas HaYeshes, as we explained many times in Eilam Abriya, which is an Eilam, which is Gan Eden Elyon is Eilam Abriya. It's not just Stam Eilam Abriya. A very high and lofty spiritual world, but nonetheless it's Briya, it's already creation, it's these subtle Yeshes. And again, not to go over here to take time to explain the difference of Eilam Abriya and Atzilus, but in context, yes, Eilam Atzilus is a world, and in one hand it's an Eilam with Midas and so on and so forth. But on the other hand, it's overwhelmed by the Lukus. That's why Leigur Chara. There's nothing. It's not only that the infinity of Hakadosh Baruch Hu is represented in Eilam Atzilus. It says a number of places. Bichlal Eilam is Ha'in Sof. You have it is associated and aligned with and represents and is a filter for the Ein Sof. So you have this dichotomy. It's an Eilam, nonetheless it's an Eilam Sasam. Eilam Abriya, conversely, that's where it begins. The Eilam is the Almin de Isgalion, because it's a lower level. The Eilam Shabbai is revealed. The Hel V'Hester is revealed. Now, in Eilam Abriya, not so much. It's just Hascholas Hayesh. Gan Eden Elyon, very lofty spiritual domain in Seder Ishtalshalus. Yitzira, Gan Eden Tachten. Why is it Tachten? Because the Eilam Shabbai is more nigla. It's more revealed. It's more presented as an Eilam, which again, Eilam by definition is a Hel V'Hester, is a concealment of the reality of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And Eilam Asiyah, and then you have Eilam Agashmi. Yeah, this is a very revealed world. The world Shabbai, the Eilam Shabbai, the Hel V'Hester is extremely revealed. We have to look for the Elokus, find the godly reality within Eilam Haza, and it's an effort, and it's so delusional, and the Yid has to be structured, namely through Torah Mitzvahs, which extracts the emes. We spoke about this many times, that unique pasuk. The emes Hashem le'elam, the avodah of the Yid is to reveal the emes Hashem le'elam, and others to connect, to fuse the emes Hashem with elam, to find the elokus within elam, and that's, in the end of the day, that's the ultimate objective of the Eibush, to creating all the elam is in HaKadosh Baruch Hu did with Tachtenim, that in this world we should find the elokus. And what's going to be when Mashiach is going to come? All our work, is going to come into fruition, as it says, Molar is Deis Hashem Kamayim Layom Mechasim, Sasum, Kisui. That's exactly what we're leading to. We take an Eilam, which is so nigla, in other words, the Eilam Shabbai, the Hel V'Hester, the concealment is so revealed. Meaning to say, it's so clear, and it's so emphatic, this dimension of Eilam as a Hel V'Hester of Elokus, and we bring in more and more, we connect the Elokus, we connect the godly reality, or we extract and we find the godly reality embedded in Eilam. It's here. And where Hashem never went anywhere. Ani Hashem leishanisi. And Shamayim is Oretz Animal, even though Oretz Agashmi, and that's the point of Torah Mitzvahs, to find, to extract the emes which is inherent and embedded in Eilam. And to bring it out, and after the many years, thousands of years of Yidden toiling and learning, they're learning Tanya and doing mitzvahs. We mentioned also how this is even has an advantage and point even over the original again. It's Tanya mitzvahs, and mitzvahs and Tanya mitzvahs, and mitzvahs and Tanya again, and tefillah and Tanya mitzvahs again, but by extension, the Kol Masechel Shem Shamayim, Kol Rechecha Da'eyu, in all your actions, for the sake of heaven, in all your ways, knowing HaKadosh Baruch Hu, even though it's D'Rechecha. We spoke about this in the past, that we ultimately reveal the emes, the true reality of Hashem. So the world, the Olam Shabbai, is subsumed and consumed in this new reality, and as such, this world is in the end of the day going to become an Olam Sasum, overwhelmed by the reality of it. Because to what extent? Kamayim Yom Mechasim. Like the water covers the ocean bed, that when you look in the water, there's a whole world out there. There's a world out there to the extent the Gemara says, Kol ma sheyesh b'yabash sheyesh b'yam. Everything which exists on dry land exists in the water. An entire world. But what do you see? When you look in the dry land, you see a world, and you know that there's different... there's the chayas, the energy which gives life to the world. If it's tzemeach and chay, for example, people eat from this which grows on the land, which is the world vegetation, but starting from the grain and the wheat and other types of food items, which is staples, that is, which ultimately bring chayas to animals and to the human being, and even this which gives the ability for the tzemech to grow and to exist is also through water, if it's the natural water of rain or irrigation of water. There, you have to find the happenings which makes this happen after seeing the reality of creation. This is the Alma Galia. You look on the ocean. You look into the world of Yam as opposed to Yabasha. You know that the water is the energy of the entire world under the Mayim, but you don't see that world. What you see is just the life and the energy, which is Mechaya, which gives the existence and vivifies everything in the world of the Yam. This is what you see on the onset. And then you look closer and you say, oh, there's a whole world in there. And to the extent you look in the Gemara, it says, Kol ma sheyesh b'yabash sheyesh b'yam. But that's secondary. What you see at the onset, you just see the water which gives chayis to that whole world in the Yam. That's the way things are going to unfold and Mashiach is going to come. This Olam, which is so nigla, the Olam Shabbai is so nigla. And unfortunately, but through our toil, for all these years from Matan Torah, namely, we are megala the emes Hashem la'olam. In the end, it's going to be so overwhelming that we're going to have to look for matters of olam, because it's going to be so overwhelmed with the lukus. That's the message. Umola ha'oretz deis Hashem. Not just going to be a lot of knowledge of because we're in this world, and much knowledge and a lot of knowledge, and many people are going to have that knowledge. No. Umola, it's going to be full and overfull. To what degree? The pasuk continues, Kamayim le'yom mechasim, like water covers the ocean bed. What you see is the water, and look deeper, then you'll see, oh, there's a world out there, and so too, this world is going to be so transformed from a Olam Nigla, and how Nigla is it. As we mentioned before, very Nigla, and again, as a disadvantage, that world is going to become meaning to say that you're going to have to look for matters of Olam, because what is going to be overwhelming is going to be the Emes Hashem is going to overwhelm reality, our very nitty-gritty reality. And we're going to have to look into it and say, yeah, it's a Holocaust. Now let's try to find the Olam. Because the Olam is going to be consumed and subsumed into this Emes Hashem. And that's the greatness of this Mesa Mashiach, that it's not just like a little better, it's a revolutionary difference. So again, back to the Vart over here, that the Oisis HaMachshava HaKadosh Baruch Hu produce Al Min Stimin, Oisis HaDibur, which again bring things much in a limited manner, and in a way that, as we mentioned, Dibur is much more structured, and it's also that that space, or this talent, or this kayach, or this chush, that is the interface between the party who speaks and the world around him. While machshava that remains within the thinker, speech is already an expression and is a koyach which connects the person to out of the domain of the person. You do know what I'm talking, but you don't know what I'm thinking. And again, everything is interconnected. The reason why it's ladaber is lachshus, because it's a step away from the nefesh, and therefore it is extremely structured, and it is a connecting point to the human, from the human being, the talker, to the recipient, to the domain out of the person who's talking. It's already a koyach which is inferior, certainly, in comparison to the koyach HaMachshava. And so too by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The koyach, the dibur of HaKadosh Baruch Hu creates alman de izgalion, which are at a lower level than the almin stimin created by HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Machshava. So let's see it inside. So he says, the shnei minei elemis, the heim shnei minei, is just under the center of the page, towards the end of the line, bein shnei minei elemis, the two types of worlds, almin stimin the leiz galion, the hidden worlds which are not revealed. They are created and brought into life and brought into existence and are vivified from the keiches of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which are similar to Eisis HaMachshava. These are energies which are ne'lomis, concealed, coming from a deeper part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, similar to the Eisis HaMachshava Shebinishmas Ha'adam, the letters of thought in the neshama of man, al derech mashal, as an example. And then you have the almin de izgalia in this world, this world which is revealed, nivru b'chayim izgalus, shenizgalu keiches v'amshachas analomes hanikrois b'shem Eisis HaMachshava, v'shem chines izgalus lahachis almin de izgalia nikr b'shem mamores udvar Hashem b'ruach piv. Yeah, a lot of text read, but it's again very simple. These worlds, which are Almidis Galio, were created from the Dibur of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The way the Eisis are manifest from the world of Eisis HaMachshava, those same Eisis HaMachshava, when they come to express, to a state of expression, a state of manifestation, they take formation as ma'amores, dvar Hashem, not only machshavas HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but dibur, which is a step lower, which is naturally inferior, and as such, they create alman de izgalion, these worlds which are revealed. Again, the olam shebahem is revealed, which is naturally inferior to the almin stimin, and they're called maimores. Why they call maimores? Simply similar to the Eisis of speech by man, which reveal to the listener this which was hidden in his heart. You don't know what the thinker thinks, but you know what the talker talks. You can appreciate he's relating something. The talker is relating something that the recipient can understand and perceive, this which he is conveying, he or she is conveying, because this is the point of speech, to connect, to establish something out of the system of the talker, as opposed to Eisis HaMachshava. And so to these worlds, Almidis Galiim, they're out of the domain of the talker, in this case of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but not totally, because Les Asar Panimine, there's no place devoid of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, there's no place void of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but that's the way it appears. Does it appear so? Do we have to bring proof that it appears so? Look at Ilm Hazeh Gashmi, the world we live in. Every part and parcel of Ilm Hazeh is the Dvar Hashem, which is Mahava Mechayim Mekayimit, which is given life and existence. There's no other energy, nothing independent. Everything is the same HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which creates Elam Hazeh, the same HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which dwells and creates and emanates Elam Hatzilus. Exactly the same. Because where did Hashem go? But that's the way it appears. It appears so distinct and appears so different. Why? Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu created, for example, Elam Hazeh with the Ma'amoris. But the Mamoris, again, just like it is by man, is the way you go away from yourself. It's out of your domain. It leaves your domain. Can't put it back into. Many people we mentioned so many times, when it comes to Dibur, they like to put it back into their system, but they can't put it back into their system because it has already left. And Kaviyochel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, this is a world, on the surface, it appears that it left. the energy of the oneness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And again, you see it evidently. A world like this world is nothing of this world. We're not talking about control or overlooking or governing. What governs this world is obviously solely HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Who else? No, the whole Olam, the mere fabric of Olam is HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Rambam has when it comes to Avraham Avinu, Vayikra Shem Hashem Keil Olam, not Shem Keil Ha Olam, that Hashem is the God of the world. We had this in the past. We spoke about this in Likutei Amorim when we learned Likutei Amorim. That the Keil Olam has a total different message. Not Keil Ha Olam, the God of the world, but Keil Olam. You look at the world; it's all Keil. It's all the HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Everything is the energy of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And you open your eyes to this world, is that message coming to the forefront? No, not at all. It's not in the forefront, and it's not in the backdrop. Unfortunately, you look at a world and you see a world which the reality of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not evident, and you have to start searching it. And again, it's through toiling and taita and doing Hashem's mitzvahs and refining the world, sublimating the world, taking, for that matter, that's what mitzvahs are all about, taking matters of the world and making a mitzvah, establishing them as a mitzvah. If it's tefillin, if it's mezuzah, if it's a sefer taita, if it's tzitzis from physical wool, and it's a whole service. And what are we doing? We're just scratching the surface to find the emes, because the emes Hashem is la'olam. But on the surface you don't see it. Similar to the idea of speech, that it leaves the domain of the talker. Kaviyachol, the Eilam which was created is the Eilam, these Almin, the Izgalion, which are naturally less and lower and inferior than the Alman Stimin, as we explained, come from the Dibur HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Then again, the only thing is, the Alter Rebbe clarifies. You can take a look in Perek Chaf Aleph, in Likutei Amorim, that is 21. Remember, Shaykh Ramon has 12 segments. 21 in Likutei Amorim. Alter Rebbe points out that there ought to be a difference, the way it is by man, the way it is by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because when you speak, you're here. Your speech leaves you, and it goes into the atmosphere. People pick it up, and many times they do whatever they want with it. Take it out of context, whatever it is. It left you. Many people would love to put certain words they said back into their system, but they can't, because it has left their system, and they are limited to a place. When it leaves them, it goes out to a place which is a whole world, and many people, and billions of people, which are, again, not part of who you are. Conversely, when it comes to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you can't say, well, it left HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and where did it go? That other place, Hashem is not there. Hashem is there as well. Everything is Hashem. No place void of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So it really can't be that it really leaves HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And as such, the Almin, these Galion, can't be there really locked in indefinitely as Almandis Galion, because in the end of the day, the emes HaKadosh Baruch Hu is here like he's in Atzilus, and that's what's going to unfold. Mashiach is going to come. The emes, this is the truth of this very Olam. The way it's the emes in Atzilus, because Hashem didn't go anywhere. The only thing is, Hashem created the world in such a manner that this is similar to the way it is by Dibur of man. It left the person. It deals with a new reality, the reality of the recipient, and so too Hashem created the world in such a manner that it appears now it's nigla, now it's separate kaviyachol of the Achdus Hashem. Why did Hashem do that? Because He wanted that we should be megala this emes Hashem la'olam, that we should reveal the Achdus Hashem by proclaiming and announcing Hashem Echad, and to ourselves, and to take this message and revolutionize it in our own conscious being, in our own. It should filter through our system and eventually into our families and societies and the entire world. And at the end of the day, not the whole Beis HaMedrash or the Koil, the entire land will demonstrate what? This is which is really inherited and embedded in the reality of Elam, because Hashem didn't go anywhere. In the place where Hashem spoke, His whole core and His whole essence is in that Dibur. And this is what we do throughout the many millenniums and Golus, that we megala till we come to the peak of Hashem Lamelech HaKol when we Hashem Echad U'Shmei Echad. But till then, we see the world was created in a very distinct manner, similar to the way it is by Dibur. But again, it's a similarity. It's not the way it is, because again, by human being, he's limited to one place. The speech truly leaves the human being. Once it leaves the human being, it's disconnected. truly disconnected by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You can't say that Dibur is disconnected. Nothing leaves HaKadosh Baruch Hu because HaKadosh Baruch Hu is everywhere. But the Eibishter created the world in such a manner that it appears so for the based on that, and again, for the overall reason, because of this master plan. But so this is the idea of the Mamores, like it reveals to the other party, there's another party, this which is hidden in your own heart. And the Alter Rebbe continues, what I want to know, that and ultimately Hashem's even Dibur is much greater than the Seichel. Alter Rebbe even says higher not only the midas of the created beings, but higher than the Chachma, higher than the Seichel, the whole depth of the intellect of this which exists within creation, starting from man. Instead, within Seichel itself, the Chachma, which is the deepest Nekuda of man's intellect. We explained many times, Chachma is also not just one level higher than Bina Das, it's a different phenomenon. It has so much soul energy and it's so deep. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Dibur is even higher than the Seichel and the Chachma, the highest levels, how much more so the Midas, than all creation. Where do we see it? Because when Hashem uttered these words, shall there be man in the above form, in the above image? What was created? The Adam, the man, not only the outer shell of man, and then HaKadosh Baruch Hu had to do something new to put into the human being, additional to the outer layer, a new inner layer, which would be Midas, and then Chachma, and then Bina and Das. No, Hashem said the words, Nasa Adam. What was created? The entire phenomenon of the human being. And the human being, which is this Chachma and Seichel, with all the depth which exists within the human being, all came from Hashem's Dibur. With that tells you that Hashem's Dibur is much greater and deeper than everything which is created from Hashem's Dibur. Eventually, the Alter Rebbe is going to say that we can appreciate this also the way it is by the human being. Because when you talk, especially the talking of a deep person, it's reflective of all the inner workings of the person talking. It's reflective of the person's emotions, and reflective of the person's intellect. In the highest, deepest levels, like it's the expression, Nafshe Yotze Bedabre, the Pasuk says, someone's soul could be expressed through his words. So the words, conversely, there are words which don't have any depth. We gave the example that a professor comes to present a particular essay, an important presentation, and he comes into the hall and he asks one of his accomplices, "Can you take my coat and hang it up on the hook?" And then he begins his presentation. And someone wants to repeat, for example, his presentation. It would be simply funny if he began. He started by take my coat and hang it up on the hook, and then he goes on with the presentation. No, that was just something which was extremely external. That didn't demonstrate the inner workings of the professor, his knowledge, his greatness, and his depth, and so on. That's just words which are inferior by definition. For that matter, when it comes to a Talmud Chacham, it says Sichas Chulin Shel Mitamid Chacham Tzrichim Limud. We spoke about this in the past. Because the Talmud Chacham, every gesture and every expression of the Talmud Chacham really carries that inner depth. But again, it's a separate idea. But generally, there are dimensions of speech which are inferior, which don't carry the inner workings, don't contain the inner workings of the human being. There are words which do, to the extent nafshi yotze bedabre. Sometimes soul can carry not only the emotions and the intellect of the human being, but even a soul could be expressed in words as we all know it. So the Alter Rebbe is going to say in the end that just like it is by man, when it comes to HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Dibur, obviously it doesn't commence from Dibur. It carries Hashem's Midas and it carries Hashem's Das and Bina and Chochmah. So when Hashem uttered the words Nasa Adam Mitzalmeinu, the entire package of man came to being, not only out of the outer layer, but all the deep dimensions of which exist, as we all know it, within the human being, his midas, his seichel, and even his chachma. And he says not only in dibur, even the supreme breath literally translates as Hashem breathed into the human being this soul of life. So what does that tell you? That the dibur of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and the supreme breath of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is the source, not only the outer layer, the external dimension of man, but it's the source of wisdom and the seichel, the intellect, which exists in the soul of man, Adam Arishem, the first Adam, the first human being created by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. At that point, Hashem said, which Adam Arishen's neshama. You want to see what Hashem's, the energy of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's dibur. It's so potent, it's so strong, that when HaKadosh Baruch Hu uttered those words, Nasa Adam Mitzalmenu, you have an entire structure of a human being, the most profound dimension and dynamic within all creation. That was created from HaKadosh Baruch Hu just uttering the words, Nasa Adam Mitzalmenu. Who was created? Adam Arishan. And we know Adam Arishan was the perfect human being. But beyond that, Alter Rebbe adds, it includes all the neshamas of all the tzaddikim, which are G'deilim Malachi Asharis, which we're going to stop over here, which tells us that not only Adam Arishan was created, that perfect human being, which again, every human being has that depth and that profundity which doesn't exist within all creation. And that came into being just by Hashem saying the words Nasa Adam, which tells you that Hashem's words are greater than not only than the inferior dimension of creation, but the deepest parts of creation. Even Adam Bal Chochmah V'Seichel is created. But where do we see it at first? When Adam Arishan was created, that perfect human being. And not only that, Adam Arishan's neshama included the neshamas of all the tzaddikim, which that tells you how much energy is there in Hashem's dibur and Hashem's utterance. And Alter Rebbe adds, G'deilim Malachi Asharis, which is important to note. Tzaddikim are even greater than the celestial malachim, than the celestial angels, which is again a topic on its own. In the end of the day, malach neshama is coming from a deeper part. Alter Rebbe explains this in Geras HaTshuva. There are a few places, in many places in Chassidus, but elaborately in the Geras HaTshuva, how the Alter Rebbe points out that in the end of the day, the neshama of a yid is greater and by far than all the malachim, and not Moktab Malachim, Malachi Asharis, those malachim which stand in complete submission, constant submission to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and everything about them is about servitude, everything about them about serving their Creator. The neshamas of tzaddikim are even greater than that, and if you look at the Shara Igeres HaTshuva, you see it's by far greater, it comes from a total different level, and all these neshamas of tzaddikim are embedded in Adam Arishan, in his neshama, his makeup included everything about, in other words, Adam Arishan's creation as the Adam Harishan included the neshamas of all tzaddikim, which are greater than the Malachi Asharis, and all this came from what? From HaKadosh Baruch Hu just uttering the words Nasa Adam B'Tzalmeinu, which tells us that HaKadosh Baruch Hu's words, even though it's the most inferior of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's expressions, as we explained and we pointed out throughout these parakim, is just the iciest. But in the end of the day, Hashem's words create the deepest parts and the deepest realities within creation, the human being starting from Adam Arishan, and again, which includes all the neshamas. Kol HaTzadikim, mean to say Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Moshe, Aaron, David, Shlomo, all the myriads of tzaddikim throughout all generations are all included in the neshama of Adam Arishan, and that all came to being from one utterance of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the most inferior expression of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is the Maimer, as we explained. One Maimer of HaKadosh Baruch Hu created that, Nasa Adam B'Tzalmeinu. Have a wonderful